and security. What do you think? Where should we focus?
Thanks, Mr. Sengupta. So, just kind of casting our minds back to the problem at hand over here. We've been talking about the end-to-end security issues and obviously the law enforcement agencies who are desperately trying to, enforce some sort of controls over this matter. The way I think we should approach this from a people aspect is not to restrict cybersecurity to a precisely technical and process orientation, because it is a social issue. When we're talking about the people aspect, it is definitely a social issue which needs a different form of treatment. As the journal articles and Schneiers in 2004 has mentioned, that the weakest link in security compliance is actually between the chair and the keyboard, or rather the keyboard and the chair. That technically means that no matter what sort of security controls you have in place, and you have awareness programs such as this one, which are talking on a very technical aspect, the awareness is not sufficient to uphold security compliance. So, going back to your question, that how would you conceptualize the people problem with psychology? So, a good way to analyze this question would be predicting how our user responds to security compliance, because essentially what we're talking about is compliance. In your case, law enforcement or cloud or any form of service provider. So you can have all these technical controls in place, and the users may be aware, but it's not necessary that awareness will dictate the motivation of the users to comply with the situation at hand. So I think I'll just quickly give you a snapshot of the theory of planned behavior, which is a behavioral psychology framework, and how that deconstructs why a user is not motivated to comply. So when we're looking at theory of planned behavior, what it suggests is that there are two aspects. So let's just take a step back, and I'm sorry if I have to steer away from the technical aspect and bring you to...
No, we are not talking technical. T has been dealt with. You talk about people.
Thank you very much for that allowance. All right, so in predicting how a user responds to security compliance, there are two essential issues. The first one is the user cognizance of control. What that basically means is that the user is aware of what to do in order to comply with their security measures. But that is actually not the problem as we see it and as we understand it today, because I think everybody understands not to tap into a spoofing mail, or to sort of have your security in place, as you were mentioning, not to download those good morning apps, however attractive they may seem, to brighten up your morning. You should not do that. So I think the most important aspect over here would be the behavioral response. So despite having that knowledge that this is something we should not do, why is it that we're not motivated not to do it? So the theory of planned behavior mentions that there are actually three components which assist the user in gaining that motivation in order to comply with the security and actually act on their belief system. So this first one is an attitude towards a specific behavior. The second one is subjective norms about the target behavior. And the third one is the perceived behavioral controls. I'll just quickly take a minute to explain that, if I may. Right. So when you're looking at the theory of planned behavior, what do you mean by attitude? The belief system that you've internalized and you have pretty much convinced yourself that this is an important thing to do. So when an individual evaluates a behavior psychologically, there are two aspects related to that internalization. The first one is actually the belief about the consequences of the behavior. And what I'll do for the ease of the audience is I'll just explain the theory and I'll link it back to security, if I may. So going back to what I was saying, the first one of the attitude towards that behavior is the belief about the consequences of the behavior. The second aspect is the corresponding positive and negative response that you have around the behavior. So in a nutshell, that means that if I were to engage in this behavior, are the results desirable for me? That's the first aspect. The second aspect is a subjective norm that you associate with the particular behavior, which means that how do social pressures around you influence your belief system about that behavior? So if you see a couple of people, sitting down in a particular manner, are you more likely to be influenced by that behavior or that belief system and that triggering your behavior? Then you have and this is again in the subjective norm section, that is there someone important for whom you choose to conduct the behavior? And obviously, intuitively, you can understand in a corporate setting, if your management have, sort of outlined a particular set of policies, then obviously that level of leadership is important for you because you're sitting in a hierarchical position, and therefore it will benefit you to actually act out that behavior. And the last one is the perceived behavioral control that affects your behavior. Now, in this context, control does not mean like I have control over the situation. What theory of planned behavior is mentioning is that control over your confidence about that behavior, which means that do I have the psychological motivation, the cognitive resources, and an understanding of the task to complete the behavior. And the last one is that the association action around the behavior. So in the perceived behavioral control, it's not important only to be confident that I can, carry out this behavior. There's also the fact that I am confident about the difficulty of the task, and therefore I am motivated to act out the behavior. So an amalgamation of all these factors lead to fortifying the intent and then the actual behavior. So again, I'm sorry to take you around the circle and bringing it back to security compliance. So what this basically translates into the security compliance area is that if an employee holds a favorable attitude towards security compliance in their organization or generally in society, and the employee or the user has observed people around them or in the environment practicing and engaging with that behavior on a frequent basis, and that user perceives that he or she is confident enough to carry out the behavior, that would in turn trigger a strong intent to internalize that behavior, and then that would actually lead to compliance. I know this is a very roundabout way of going about it, but I think the issue at hand over here is not necessarily the awareness aspect, because I think that's where a lot of people feel that that's where the conversation is getting stuck. It's more about being motivated enough to actually carry out the task.
There are two parts, competency and awareness. Because without the awareness, even if the person is competent, they will not do it. They need to be aware why I am doing it, and only after they have the competence, they will be doing it. Now you broke the awareness part into some other levels. So awareness part, you spoke that we have to give them that assurance that the work, the policy, procedure, whatever has been given to them, that is achievable. It is not difficult.
Yes.
Because that is something like uphill, how uphill the task is. That perception also makes sure that whether the compliance will be followed or not.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And this other part that you discussed, everybody has something valuable. So attach that policy, procedure, reward to something that he values. Right? And if that reward comes through something which he values, maybe you said the business continuity of his even job, his family,
life,
right? His life. Because if he's following the process, maybe we discussed that at home, that mobile will be safe because his daughter or son can actually put a new app over there and put the entire thing at risk. So to keep these things protected, that can be also a reward, right? So whatever he values. So combined this has to be a motivation, and that motivation comes into the awareness, and from awareness comes into the competency, and finally it goes, right?
May I just add something to that? So I think another thing that I was talking to the esteemed panelists behind the scenes, and there's also this perception around security which is very scary, and that serves as a deterrence to the motivation factor of people. So instead of and as you said, instead of something that it should be feared, it's something that should be revered. What I mean by that is that by not complying, there's something which is, you're going to get destroyed and your files are going to get hacked. That is definitely true. But the way to increase your motivation would be to maybe look at the glass from a half full perspective, which means that if you comply, then the chances of you sustaining your job, like you were saying, the chances of you having a good and a healthy family life is more probable, and that will trigger the motivation aspect in you to actually compliance. It's just like tweaking the conversation slightly towards a positive light to actually enforce this social benefit or issue.
Cool. Before I open up the session for question answers, I would like to remind you people, we have a nice session coming up at 3:15, Hack the Hackers, which is a game, interactive game, where we take you through the game and you people will tell me what is the problem. We take you through crime scenarios, cyber crime scenarios, and you will detect the problem. We have around 5 round tables over here, so we'll try to keep within these 5 round tables, and if nobody can answer, we can go to the further audience. And at 4:45, we have an extreme hacking competition where we give you some live demo. What can be done with an unpatched firewall router, which is very common in most of the companies. So how we have planted a exploit into a firmware and take full control of that data. I believe this you have never seen before. So we will try to put that into the extreme hacking sessions plus something more. So and there are some more sessions which are coming up post lunch. So please don't go away, and please be here in the room after your lunch. Any question you have,